Welcome to this week's edition of Black Authors Matter TV, where we interview the latest movers and shakers in the African American literary community. You'll meet some old friends, discover new ones, and stay abreast of the latest book developments around the country and even the world. So sit back and relax for the next 2 hours with Black Authors Matter TV co-hosts Gwen Richardson and Dr. Rhonda Lawson.
Hello, it is May 23rd, and welcome to Black Authors Matter TV. I'm Gwen Richardson, your host for tonight, and my co-host, Rhonda Lawson, is running a little late. She'll be on the show later. Before we get started in our show, I do want to announce for those of you who don't know, urban fiction author Tracy Brown passed away on Saturday, and Tracy actually won our Black Authors Matter TV award last week in the category of urban fiction. So we want to show her picture just so people who may not know who she is. She's been writing for many years, and her books were really, really exceptional. In fact, our book club that I'm in, we discussed her latest book, Hold You Down, on Saturday at our book club meeting. And that was the day that she passed away. So anyway, we want to give our condolences to her friends and family and fans. And also if you go to her author Facebook page, her children have announced that they're having a wake next week for her in Staten Island on Wednesday. So if you're in the New York area, you might want to attend, or you may just want to post your condolences on the author page. She will be missed in the literary community, and she was only 48 years old. So Tracy, you'll be missed. So before we get started with our amazing show for tonight, I do want to have a couple of announcements. The National Black Book Festival registration for standard registration ends May 31st. If you haven't registered, after that, the price goes up. And also, we're already at 80% capacity. So if you're planning to attend, please go ahead and register as an author. And our book club kickback on June 13th, we're reading this book by Connie Briscoe, You Never Know. And for those who plan to participate in the kickback, if you haven't gotten a copy of the book, please do so. We'll be giving away 3 autographed copies that night. So we have books to give away in that, but we're going to do that later after Rhonda gets on the show so she can manage that. And we have our first guest. She is no stranger to Black Authors Matter TV, no stranger to the National Black Book Festival, and no stranger to anyone who reads books, it reads Black books, and just knows about books. So Donna Gill, the incomparable Donna Gill, welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Hi, Gwen. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderfully. And I'm so excited we were able to get you on the show on your book release date.
I know, right? Timing is everything.
Yeah, with your new book. And do you have a copy of it with you so you can
let me see.
Hold it up for us? It'll show. It should. I think you need to do it closer to you or away. One of the. There you go. There you go. I Am Aya, The Way Home.
Yeah, that's it.
And I've been hearing great things about it. Just like some of the buzz from people who got the arcs of the book beforehand. And we weren't lucky enough to get one, but hopefully I will buy my copy. So I really loved your last book, Confessions in B Flat. I don't know if it was that was your last book, because I know you write romance, and you might have had some other romances in between there. But since I don't read romance, I don't keep up with the releases as much. I rarely read, although Confessions in B Flat was a romance.
Yeah, it was romantic.
It was. And it was historical, and that was the aspect of it I really, really liked. So tell us about the new book that you have, I Am Aya. Okay. And who is Aya, and what made you come up with that concept?
Well, let's see. I'm very prone, for some reason, I'm very drawn to the small town of Sag Harbor, just off Long Island in New York. And I'd been there before. I set a couple of my romances in Sag Harbor, and I knew that I wanted to set another story there. So after doing Confessions in B flat and getting the sort of the historical bug again, I wanted to take a look at what I could do next. And when I began my research on the town of Sag Harbor, which I knew some about in terms of African-American history and the role of Black people building communities in Sag Harbor from its early foundings to now, I knew that that was a place that I wanted to start. And when I started digging some more, I discovered that the slave schooner, La Amistad, when it came aground, it docked off the shores of Sag Harbor. And so the captives were taken off the boat and they were transferred to another boat, and then they were taken to Connecticut for trial. And so a lot of people who know anything about that slave ship and the hero of that particular era was Cinque, a man. And so as I'm doing my research, I'm like, wow, this is really great. This is a good place to start. This is like 1839. And, being a English professor, I always teach my students, when you're beginning your paper, you need to think about what is your question? What if? And when you find your answer, then you have your thesis, you have your answer, and you have what you can build on. And so using that same concept, my thought was, when I discovered that there were 53 supposedly 53 slaves on the ship. And what if when they took everybody off, there were only 52? Who was that person that got away? So the person that got away is my contemporary character's ancestor, who is a woman, and her name was Aya. And she was captured on the beaches of Mendoland, which is now Sierra Leone. And so I began building with that concept that this is going to be this person and what is her journey. But I also knew that I wanted to sort of have this hybrid type story where the contemporary character, my main character, Alexandra, is almost like in conversation with her ancestors throughout the novel. And so to do that, I had to create this timeline of her ancestors on her mother's side. So it's the women's history. And so essentially the story is about this young woman, Alexandra Fleming, who had a dysfunctional relationship with her father after her mother passed. And when she turned 18, she left Sag Harbor and she moved to New York. She's a photographer, and she's never been back. She is forced to come back when her father becomes ill and is hospitalized. He has an accident. And when she returns home, her thing is, I'm going to make sure he's right and get himself together, and then I'm leaving, I'm going back. But that doesn't happen. There's another instance that happens that keeps her there. And over the ensuing weeks, she discovers that there was a chest that had been hidden from her all her life by her mom. And in this chest is essentially the history of her family from the time Aya broke free in 1839. And so the discovery of her lineage is through a series of letters, journals, newspaper articles, artifacts, all of these things that are stored in this chest. And so the reader is going on this journey with her. And then of course, she has her own contemporary issues that she has to deal with, her job and, the wonderful man next door who helps her out, and her friends. And, so you have that grounding in present day. And so we as readers go on this journey of discovery. So at the core, it's a novel about a young woman coming to terms with who she is, and what family means, and the importance of telling our stories so that our stories do not get lost. And so that's sort of the core of what it's about.
It sounds like it has a lot of layers.
Yeah, it does. It does. It has a lot of layers.
Now, is Aya the contemporary character?
Alexandra is the contemporary character.
Okay, you did say that. Okay, so
Yeah,
Aya is the historical.
Yeah, so you see Aya, you see her daughter, her daughter's daughter, all the way up to Alexandra's mother. And then we discover why the mother kept these secrets for all of those years. And so the chest itself has traveled across the country. And so what you find through each of the characters, the revelations, is each of the women, who marry and eventually have children of their own, of course, are sort of positioned in different periods of Black history across the country. So one of her ancestors got caught up in the Tulsa race riots. Another one of her ancestors was in Chicago when they had the big Chicago fire and they had to flee during the Depression. So all of and how these historical events affected Black family and people and forced us to move from one place to another. And so we get a little bit of that history as well. And those are revealed through the letters that she finds, the journals that she finds, the news clippings that were held. There are artifacts from Aya, the original character, of the tins that she used to form her own hair grease. So the tins are left, pieces of fabric from their wedding dresses. So all of that was in this chest, and we find these things out as Alexandra finds them out.
So how much of the story is factual and how much of it is fictional? Like, did you make up all the, I know you wove some historical events into the plot, but how much, like, does the person on the ship that you mentioned at first
Sinke?
ends up in Sierra Leone? No, the female.
Oh, Aya. Yeah.
Is that a real person?
No.
Okay, all right.
She's the fictional
Well,
character.
she could have been real, but
she could have been real, right? So I put her on the ship. So that's how the story starts. So she was captured along with her fiance. She was captured when she was 15. And she was she was planning to be married when she turned 16. And they were on the beach, and the slave captors came and snatched them, and took them away, and they never were able to return home. And so that's how the story begins. And it begins with Aya. Actually, her voice opens the novel, telling about her capture. But to your question about, what's real, Sag Harbor is real. It's a real place. The towns that the characters move around within Sag Harbor are real. The Tulsa race riots, of course, are real.
and the Chicago fire.
The Chicago fire is real. So all of those elements are true. And so I built the story around those elements and those time periods. And then, of course, I create, what they did and how they did things. But
And the
You know,
conversations, the dialogue and all that.
yeah, and so, I had to look at what the buildings look like. So, those types of things are real. What type of businesses were available? Like the news clippings, the headlines, those are real. So those
Okay.
were pulled from the research that I did. So those things are real. Of course, Alexandra's story is all fictionalized because she's my
Right.
contemporary
She's your
character.
contemporary character.
Yeah.
But I have a question about you, because you have what, 50, 60 books, 70 books? I forgot last time I talked to you. How many
Oh
books do
yeah.
you have? It's a
Yeah,
lot.
it's a lot. It's
It's a lot.
about 90, I think.
Oh,
So
90. Oh, okay. I was way off. Okay. I wasn't giving you your credit. I knew it was a lot. I knew it was over 50. So, but the bulk of your work is contemporary romance, correct?
the bulk of it, yeah. I would say so.
What led you to start doing this historical work? And is it something you're going to continue? I
Um,
loved Confessions in B flat. I just thought, I felt like you told that story so well that the reader was actually in the times.
yeah,
It was like they were there.
thank
That's
you.
how
Thank
well
you.
you told that story.
I really enjoy doing that. Um, I think as a writer, at least for me, ideally you want to grow as a writer, you want to challenge yourself as a writer. I always want to write about things that interest me. I mean, even my romances, there's a romance, but underneath it's some issue that I'm interested in, and so that's a thing that I want to talk about. The very first time I tried my hand at historical type fiction with contemporary characters was when I did Rhythms, and that was like in 2000.
Oh, okay.
Um, and but I never had the real opportunity to do that again, because it was like sort of one contract after another, and do this romance, and every now and then I got to do my women's fiction work, which I like doing because it has a broader foundation. But I knew that probably maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, I really started thinking about how I can merge my contemporary life and living, et cetera, and blend it with history. How can I do that? How can I take my romance readers who've been following me, for all these years with me on this journey, and not turn them off because it becomes this historical thing? And so I knew that I wanted to merge those two elements together. And in the back of my head, while I'm still working on other things, just really looking at what periods would I be interested in, because I am not a historian. That's not my specialty. I'm not a scholar or anything like that, and so I'm not wedded to a particular time period. So a lot of historical writers, they write Regency, so they study it, they know it, whatever, or they do, a certain, the 1800s, and so they're invested in it, and they become expert, in that particular area. I knew that I didn't want to do that for me. I wanted to be able to tap into a variety of time periods where Black people existed, and bring that to the forefront with a contemporary flair to it. And so um, eh, Confessions in B flat was another attempt at that. Aya is sort of the manifestation of that idea in full, because even though for most of us in a certain age group, Confessions in B flat seems very contemporary, but For our kids, it's like, what, 1960? Oh, that was a long.
If it didn't happen in the 2000s, it didn't happen.
Right, it didn't happen, right. So, and I just recently wrote an article for Writer's Digest, and I was doing some research on, historical fiction. And, historical fiction is, like anything 50 years ago.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, it's
historical now.
considered historical.
It's considered
Yeah,
historical.
it
So
is.
so me and you are historical going like,
Well, if you don't
history.
know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. That's the thing. And all of this, everything occurs on a continuum.
Yeah.
The reason that I have the values and thoughts and interests and background I have is because of my parents and what they wanted to do. My parents were both raised in a rural area. They picked tobacco, they were in North Carolina. And, praise the Lord, I didn't have to, I was after people were picking stuff because I wouldn't have been any good at that. I would have had to figure something else out. But they wanted an education. And they were very committed to education individually. And then when they came together, they were committed to it for their children. So it was understood that we were all going to college, and we all did. But we never thought we weren't going. That was just what you did after high school. That was how we were brought up. And I say that just because all of this is on a continuum. The reason why we're here where we are right now is because of a historical continuum. So you can't ignore. And to me, the history, I love historical fiction. This is my favorite genre. If it's well written, I'm gonna like it. That's just how it. And what I love is that Black historical fiction is becoming a lot more prevalent than it was, let's say 20 years ago. When we had our bookstore, there was very little of it.
Yeah.
Beverly Jenkins, and I can't think of anybody else. J. California Cooper. He was writing historical, but it just wasn't a lot of it out there.
Yeah.
And now there's enough to where I can literally read a different book a month and I still won't have them all covered, which is just wonderful.
Yeah. We were always around.
Yeah. It just, but and it's getting its due in hardcover now. Because there was some in paperback, but now I feel like when the publishers do a hardcover, they're more committed, they're more invested. Now, I could be wrong, but it just seems like it. Is that the way?
It costs them more, that's why.
That's what I thought. So I just think it's really wonderful that this genre is finally getting the traction and the due that and I hope more younger people are reading it. Now, your readership, who is your typical reader? Do you know who your typical reader is? Or is there a typical reader? Because they may not be. And now that so much is sold on Amazon, you really don't know who's reading your stuff unless they say something in a review.
Yeah, it's I think that I don't believe that I've captured younger readers. I think that I've captured, maybe the 35 and up. I don't, and I say that because I think that the majority of readers that read my work have always read my work. So as I've grown up, they've grown up with me. And they're and see, so and I came along at a time along with like Frances and Rochelle and Brenda. We came along at a time when it was like a half a dozen of us and that was it.
Right.
But now there are so many new generation of Black romance writers that these new readers find them, right? And so it's that's kind of like the way that I kind of see it. So there's a new audience for new readers, for for the newer writers, um, and I think that for me, what has helped in terms of longevity. I mean, there are people who have read my women's fiction work and have never read my romances. So I have
Yeah, when you have 90 books,
I
that's
have
just that's a lot of material.
yeah, so I have like, different kinds of audiences.
Mhm.
And I think that a book like Confessions and I Am Aya hopefully can generate a newer audience, so those readers who may not have ever been interested in a straight up love story would be interested in history.
Right.
So we'll see, but that's my goal going forward. I mean, I'll be doing, my contemporary romances in between. But my plan is to continue to look for time periods and people that I want to showcase in this sort of hybrid kind of fashion. So
Yeah,
um,
it seems like the publishing world is embracing the historical fiction from African American writers, especially females, because even people who weren't writing historical before are releasing historical books. And you would know, I'm not going to name them all, but you would know the people. And then there's some new writers that are doing historical work. So it seems like they've started paying attention to some enough people sold enough books to where
yeah.
it got their attention, because that's what gets their attention.
Yeah.
Books.
Well, back in the day, when I was coming out to your store in Texas, it's like, first of all, they didn't even think we were reading. So
Right.
that was the first issue.
Right.
So
And
like, why would
I still get that. I don't know if these people are real, but we'll put things out on Facebook, and sometimes some racist person will put, I didn't know Black people read books or what. I mean, it's just some crazy stuff. I
yeah.
don't know if they really think that or they're just being stupid. But anyway, but I mean, that it's always been there. The opportunity wasn't necessarily always there. And actually, book reading is for generally, and I won't say it's reserved, but the more educated body of people are book readers, more so. Just and then that you get class issues tied up with that and everything else. So because buying a book is a luxury, and some
Yeah.
people are in the survival mode, so they really don't have the money to invest
Right.
in. So
That's very true. That's very true.
yeah. So what do you have coming up? Do you have another book already? Because I know these books with the big publishers, the books are like 2 years in the oven before they come out.
I'm working on 2 projects, and I actually it won't be out until like next year or the year after, whatever.
Mhm.
But I'm working on, because Harlequin has a new line. So they moved a lot of the Desire authors to this new line. So I have a book in the works for that. And then I'm working on another historical story. And it is about the Pullman Porters.
Okay.
And
All right. That's
so if you know anything about that, like, so they were really sort of like the precursors to what we now know as Amtrak, basically.
right.
Uh,
Right.
and
And that was considered a good job at that time.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They got to
They were
travel.
essential for, beginning to build the Black middle class. They'd
Yeah.
come with uniforms and but it was a hard job. It was
Yeah.
hard work.
Yeah.
Um, So, I'm building a story around them in that time period. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, we're at the end of our time, Donna. I'm so glad you came on. I'm so
Thank you.
excited about your new release. I can't wait to get my copy, which I'll have soon, and I can't wait to read it. So thank
Thank you.
you
Thank you.
for
Thank you.
continuing to write, and happy book release day.
Thank you. Thank you. And continue success for all that you do. Thank you for always supporting authors, in everything that you do, So I
Well,
appreciate you.
you're welcome. We love what we do. And I just keep coming up with different ideas. I got some stuff in the works, some more
Uh-oh.
stuff in the works. So so
I will stay
anyway, I
tuned.
have to try to keep it fresh,
Yes,
You don't want to
absolutely.
get stale. So I'm working on some stuff. So thank you so much, Donna, and everybody that can get their books for Donna online. She's everywhere. And your website is
DonnaOHill.com. Yeah.
okay.
And actually, if you go to Facebook, there is, for those of you who like to listen to your books, they are running a special today, 50% off of the audio version of I Am Aya.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. If you all want to get the audio version, go to Facebook and you can get it there at 50% off. So
Yes.
thank you so much again. And we'll see you next time on your next release.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, for those who are tuning in a little late, Rhonda will be on, but she had to work later today than she normally does. So she's going to come on as soon as she gets home from work. And we have our next guest. And this is, I don't think, well, we have had it. We have had comic book before, but not an established one. We haven't had a founder of a comic book enterprise on the show before. So we want to welcome Joel Christian Gill to Black Authors Matter TV.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And he is, if I'm correct, the founder of Strange Fruit Comics.
Yeah, I mean, I say founder of Strange Fruit Comics, but Strange Fruit was really just the mini comics that I was doing before my books were published. So, I probably published about 6 or 7 of those before I got them finally published in 2014. And so like, it's still like my LLC is still Strange Fruit Comics, but for the most part, it's not really a comic book company where I'm actually like and getting people to come in and publishing their work. I usually just make my own work now.
Oh, okay. Well, a lot of times businesses are established for the author to publish their own work.
Exactly. And I get a lot of questions about people asking about like how publishing works. And comics publishing is a little bit different than publishing for prose. So it's a little bit different, and it's a lot more, it's a lot more involved. Writing and drawing a graphic novel can take up to 2 years, and it's very involved. And I also teach, so I'm a professor too. So I run a MFA in comics at Boston University. So given that, like, it's just a lot. I don't watch TV, so there's this one thing.
Well, that's good. You're not really missing a lot. It's a lot of the same thing over and over. And what they do to make it seem like it's different is they'll add more violence or more blood or more sex or but they don't. But new, like really new and creative, it's not a lot. It's not a lot out there. It is some, but I have high standards for what I want to watch. I don't just like to watch just anything that's on. And so some of the stuff, I'm like, somebody threw it together, or some people seems like they're just kind of depressed and they write depressing stuff. I don't know. Anyway, on the cartoons, I've seen a lot of the graphic novels, and I can believe it takes 2 years, because that's a lot of
2 years or more,
words.
depending on So I just finished this graphic novel with Ibram
Okay.
X. Kendi, which will be out in June. And this one took me, Ibram X. Kendi's book, Stand from the Beginning, won the National Book Award in 2016. And so I took a 529-page history tome. I think it's over there on my table, and I turned it into 288 pages of comics, which was very complicated because you have to take really complex ideas and boil them down into images in which people can understand immediately, while also not writing a whole lot of the words. So, comics is this razor edge of how, in writing, people often tell you like show, don't tell, right? So if I were to say, Gwen, I want you to write a story, and I want you to write a story about a person who comes into the room angry. The easiest way to say it is like, when Joel walked into the room, he was angry, right? But that's boring. So you want to say, Joel walked into the room, kicked over the chair, pulled out a blowtorch, lit the place on fire. I don't have to say he's angry because you know it, right? So with comics, there's this really fine edge for how much do I show you to, how much of the image do I show you versus how much do I tell you, because the words and the pictures have to do this dance that neither one of them does by themselves. It's a very complicated thing where they're trying to get you to think differently about what happens when you look at the pictures. So for example, take that same scenario, Joel walks into the room, angry, sets everything on fire. I might show you all of those things, but in the background, I might say something like, the check was not nearly as big as he wanted it to be, right? So like those two things coming together form a different image and give more information than either one of them would do by themselves.
Oh, okay. Now, graphic novels, they've been around a long time, or it seems like there is a fairly new genre, but maybe it's just getting more exposure.
Well, it's not a genre, it's more like a medium. And so think about it in terms of like writing, right? Novels have only been around for probably a couple of 100 years. People started writing novels in the late 1890s, middle of 1800s. People started writing like full-fledged novels, right? Comics started to come around at the exact same time. It starts off as short little stories, and they get longer and longer and longer. Until we get mostly what we think of as comics. When people think about it, you think superheroes, or you think funny kids and newspapers. Yeah. So people typically think, they think about the Peanuts, they think about Calvin and Hobbes and those kind of things. They definitely don't think about Angela Davis, right? So comics are the medium that you use to tell the story, and they don't dictate what the actual story is. So for example, if you really like historical fiction, there's lots of books about historical fiction. If you like romance, there's lots of graphic novels and comics about romance. If you like science fiction, there's all of those things, right? It would be, like people have a tendency to ask me things like, do you draw for Marvel or DC? And I always ask, like, the question that runs through my mind is like, if you were talking to Stephen King and you knew that he, drew horror and fantasy, would you ask him what his favorite hit? Like, so have you ever written a book about Thomas Jefferson, right? He doesn't write historical fiction, right? So like, that's the thing. Like, it's just like you using words to do this. It doesn't mean that they're all connected. And I think because they're images and pictures, people have a tendency to connect them all the time. And that's just different. I always tell people I'm a comics evangelist. I think if you like stories and there's a type of story that you like, you can find a way to tell that story in comics, and you can find stories like the ones you like in comics.
Okay, so the new book that you have coming out in June, what is the overall plot, storyline?
So Stamped from the Beginning is a definitive history of racist ideas in America. So it tells the story through 5 individual characters: Cotton Mather, not they're real people, Cotton Mather, Thomas Jefferson, William Lloyd Garrison, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Angela Davis. And it basically traces a history of the racist ideas in America, the foundational ideas that built, that underpin capitalism, that underpin the United States, that underpin a lot of societal issues, and explains how they've migrated to the common day. I'll give you one really good example, which is not in the book.
Okay.
During the opioid crisis, like in the last 10 or 12 years, there was a large amount of people being addicted to opioids. Now, that didn't hit Black people in the same way. And there was also another one that happened in the early part of the 20th century, in the 1920s, because doctors were giving housewives morphine for headaches, for menstrual cramps, for all these different things. They didn't prescribe Black people that same medicine, just like they weren't prescribing Black people pain medicine at the exact same rate, because there is a foundational idea that Black people have a higher tolerance for pain. And so that actually is still something that happens in the medical. There's actually a TikToker content creator named Joel Burrell, who actually talks about, he's a doctor and he's a med student. He might be a doctor now, but he actually spends a lot of time talking about how these foundational racist ideas still affect Black people today. You know, there's a common statement that Black men are 5 times more likely to be killed by police officers in a police interaction, where Black women are more likely to die at the hands of doctors. So doctors are doing to Black women what police are doing to Black men. And those are foundational racist ideas. To take any part of what we do and say that there's something wrong with the fact that we do that is just a racist idea that's sort of built over the course of the last 300 or 400 years. And to think that we can act our way out of it, act our way out of a situation that's completely irrational is crazy. And so the book touches on all of these ideas and how they're cyclical, how we keep saying these things, how we keep seeing these things. For example, like people will tell you how far we've come, and I always like quote that Malcolm X quote. It's like, if you pull the knife 9 inches out of my back and it's a 10-inch knife, have we made progress? But to take the idea of a lynching, because people, lynchings are no longer happening. But what happens when police killed Breonna Taylor, or killed that man in Memphis, or Falasto, like all of these people who have been killed? Those are just modern day versions of the exact same thing. And we have similar ideas to the similar people saying the same statements to what was happening during that time. They blame the victim. They say he was a thug. They say that this was that. He was a drug dealer. He deserved it. But we're talking about like random crimes that are even if they are crimes, they're misdemeanor crimes, but people are getting the death penalty up for them. And so like we still have modern day lynchings, or the fact that Black people are 13.3% of the population, but own only 2% of the wealth in this country. If all things being equal, Black people should own somewhere around the wealth. And if your answer, like Dr. Kendi says, is anything other than looking at the system, then you understand that if you say there's something wrong with Black people, that's a racist idea. But if you say there must be something wrong with the system, then that's when you start to get into the meat of it, and sort of get into this idea that we need to look at the systems and change the systems. And this book sort of just gives you a history of those systems.
Oh, okay. Well, the graphic novel portion of it that you've done, well, yeah, in conjunction, who is the target audience for that? Is that like, is there a particular target audience for that, as opposed to the book that you used as the foundation?
I think the way in which I looked at this and the way in which Dr. Kendi looked at this is sort of like, we are trying to expand it out to as many different people as we possibly can to get this message out. So the book, the graphic novel, is intended for people who won't pick up a 579-page history tome and read it. And they need other things in it. I told Dr. Kendi, I was, after I finished the book, I said, thank you for letting me put, fart jokes in your history tome, because that's pretty much what no, there's no specific fart jokes in it, but it's got that kind of thing. So it's kind of snarky, and it's funny, haha, as a like, that's not funny, kind of funny sometimes. And so it's for people who won't read that. Probably, young adults and up, but some kids will read it as well. Like, there'll be kids who will want to read it, and the themes in it are important for them as well.
So is it broken down into 5 parts with those 5 people you mentioned, or is it okay? So it's not like they're not all communicating with each other. Of course, they were not.
They do. So that's the thing. They do communicate. They do communicate with each other. So, for example, I'll have like Ida B. Wells trying to teach Cotton Mather something, you know, like trying to tell Cotton Mather a thing. So I do that kind of stuff in the book. And it is broken down and it goes through history. You know, you've got Cotton Mather, who I like, the way I like to describe Cotton Mather, he was the 17th century's, he was the 17th century's like Jerry Falwell. And he, you know, was like Austin, you know, like on the surface, superficially, we look at him as like being an abolitionist, being against slavery, but he also preached that Black people should remain slaves and to do like your earthly master, do to your earthly master as you would with your heavenly master, and that there was something wrong with Black people. He actually owned an enslaved African, Onesimus. And in the book, I use one of Onesimus's stories to explain how the first white people in America to die of whiteness were in Boston during a smallpox outbreak, because Onesimus, who was an enslaved African, was stolen from Africa and kidnapped and brought to the United States. And when Cotton Mather was given him by the congregation gave him what he said, quote unquote, a very likely slave. And they gave him to him. And the first question Cotton Mather asked him was, had he ever had smallpox? And he said, yes and no. So he goes on to explain to him that when he was a child in Africa, that they scraped some pus from smallpox and scraped it into his skin. So he got sort of a slightly milder version of smallpox. So it made him immune. And Cotton Mather tried to tell a bunch of people that this was happening. And that where he had gotten it from, and people freaked out and said no. Benjamin Franklin and his brother actually had a small printing press, and they were probably some of the first anti-vaxxers. And they were like, no, we're not going to do this. And so 900 people end up dying in that plague, and those were probably the first people in my opinion, some of the first people in America to die of whiteness.
Because they didn't accept the idea of getting antibodies from a small.
Yeah, they thought that the enslaved Africans were just it was just a plot to kill their masters. They were
okay. Interesting. So, as a cartoonist, how did you get started with that? How did you get started
as a cartoonist?
Yeah.
I always tell people that so comics is like, so I always drew comics when I was a kid. Like I think everybody draws to a certain point. You get to a place when you're about 12 years old. And you stop drawing, and like people draw a circle with 5 lines out of it and they think that's a hand, right? But when you get to about 12, a lot of people start thinking that's not really a hand. So what does a hand look like? And we start actually spending time drawing a hand. And so I was one of those people. I spent time but for me, it was noses specifically, like as opposed to just drawing the little hump, like a line and the little humps. I sat in front of the television on Saturday morning, which was in the middle of the 80s, like 1980, yeah, like Saturday morning watching cartoons. And I was drawing every nose that I possibly could from the television as fast as I could, because I wanted to know how to draw a nose. And so then I went to college because I wanted to draw comics, but there were no illustration or comics programs, which is really great because I actually run a comics program now at Boston University, but there were no comics programs. So I ended up doing graphic design, and I fell in love with painting. And then I spent the next 10 years trying to be Basquiat. I was going to be like Basquiat. I was going to make people cry with my paintings. And I tell people the way that I think to sum this story up is like comics was my high school girlfriend. We were going to get married. We were going to have kids. It was going to be the best thing ever. We spent every weekend together. Everything was great. And then we went off to college and we broke up. And then I fell in love with painting, and, I had a couple kids, but it didn't really work out. So, we ended up going apart, splitting up. And then one day in a coffee shop, I saw comics again, and we've been married ever since. So that's just the best way to describe it.
So as a result of a midlife crisis, is what you're saying.
Exactly. When in reality, I've been married 28 years and my midlife crisis was tattoos.
So what would you say to a young person who likes drawing cartoons and wants to develop a career, or they want to say, what is my future going to look like if I perfect this or keep.
I always say that the people who I always make a joke that the people who told me that I could never make money as an artist, I pay their rent now. I always say that because I think that's funny. It's not really true, but but I think it's a funny thing to say. Well, the first thing is to the thing that I think most people need to understand is that all of your choices are partially chance. There's just an element of luck that people do not understand comes into success. And so keeping that in mind and keeping that other people's choices and decisions are also about luck. So there's like a portion of it, not a whole thing. And so what I like to tell students is to hustle until you get lucky, and to spend your time staying ready so you never have to get ready. So for, a young person, a kid, or an older person, I get messages from people all over, various age limits, people peers of mine versus, people much younger, people much older. It's like, I always wanted to be a cartoonist, and there's nothing stopping you. Is to draw every day, draw and write. The difference between a cartoonist and I think, and this is not like higher than or lesser than, the difference between a cartoonist and a comic book artist is a comic book artist works with a writer to tell stories. And a cartoonist really wants to tell the story themselves. So when I think about my final piece of work, it's not one drawing or, one image that I've made. It's about the story that I'm trying to tell, whether it's, the story of my life, which I told in 2020 called Fights, One Boy's Triumph Over Violence, or all of the historical books that I've done, Strange Fruit, Uncelebrated Narratives from Black History, and Tales of the Talented Tenth, or Stamped. It's about the story. I'm excited about the story, which is like why you start asking me questions about Stamp. I could probably talk for half an hour about just like the different stories that are in there that are just wild, the way in which racism is developed in this country. So like find a thing that you're really passionate about, and if you love comics and you love stories, then focus on understanding how stories work and write and draw every day. And I don't mean like write novels. I just mean write observations, draw observations, put those two things together. Look at how the words and the pictures work together. Think about those things. Learn how to draw a nose. Sit in front of the TV. You don't have to wait till Saturday morning anymore. You can do it on YouTube or wherever and just draw all the time. Carry a sketchbook, even if you're working digital. Sometimes it helps to be outside of like an iPad drawing. Spend lots of times drawing. And I think that'll, in my opinion, hustling enough and staying ready is not guaranteed to get you success, but it's going to get you closer than you would if you were just waiting for somebody to find you.
Well, what I tell people, and that's in line with what you said, is waiting is not a strategy. There's so many people who are just waiting for something to happen to them. That's not how anything works. I don't know if that's ever worked for anybody. Regardless of what it is, you need to be working, not just
Absolutely. And I think what's important about that is, this, like, I always say, I want to make it really clear that we live in a society in which we have to struggle and we have to get out there and work because we have to make that bank, right? But there is an element of chance to all of this stuff. There's an element of chance. There's an element of chance to your decisions. And so what that means is you got to try a lot of different things. How many people have you ever met in your life that started off like, I wanted to be X, and then one day I found this and now this is what I'm doing, whether they're like, a preacher or an accountant or, something else. Like people find their passion. And I think when you mix your passion, that thing you're passionate about that you will always keep wanting to do with the hustle, right? That going out there and finding the opportunities and finding the people that want to buy the thing that you're selling, then those two things connected are the things that make people successful. Because we all have that uncle who hustles, right? That uncle who is like always on a scheme. He's got a go for service. He's doing like DoorDash. He's got a car washing business. He cleans people's houses on the side, and he always got this stuff. He will be somewhat successful, but he's not really passionate about anything that he's doing. He's just trying to make money, and there's nothing wrong with that. And we all know those people that are really, really passionate about things, but they don't hustle, right? They really want you to like read their story or do their thing, but they're not putting together the packages and sending them out to people and going to find people who and joining groups to make their work better. They're not doing any of those things. And so like, I think those are two, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like I'm not despising or disparaging anybody who would who would be passionate but don't want to hustle, and people who hustle but are not really passionate. And it's not disparaging. It's just like, that's what it is. But if you want to be successful in the way that I think most people can be and really want to be successful, you have to find the passion and you have to find that hustle and you have to combine those things, because that's where you're going to get the mix of what you're going to do. That's where you're going to get that mix that's going to be perfect and it's going to make you a better person, better and more successful.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that 100%, because I with luck, I tell people you have to be in a position to take advantage of the luck when it comes your way, because it's random. It's really, you can't plan for it. You can't predict it. But
I know you can't predict it, so you always got to be ready, right? You got to be ready so you don't have to get ready. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Always get yourself out there. You know, when my first book published, when I first got Strange Fruit published, I was at a comic show in Bethesda, Maryland, and a friend of mine, who's a friend of mine now, Jason Rodriguez, walked by the table and he bought everything on my table, all the comics, all the mini comics that I was self-publishing and making on the copiers at the college that I was teaching at the time. And he took them back to his hotel room. He read everything. He came back and he's like, I read everything. This is dope. You should talk to my publisher. If he just walked a different direction, or if I'd gone and got coffee, right? Like there's like so many things about that interaction that it would never happen. Right. And, you know, I had one agent prior to my previous agent, and that agent was like really great, but also like it just wasn't working out. And then we went our separate ways. And so then a friend of mine was like, you should talk to this person. And then I was like, I'm not really sold on agents. And then I finally do connect with the agent, and she's the one that gets me the deal for this book.
Major
and yeah, and so and I think that's, you know, and it's like the chance thing, right? Like my agent, you know, at the time was like, I can't really do this anymore. And so there's lots of little chance things like that happens. And I think, as my daughter would always say, or all of my daughters and my son too would say, is like, when you open yourself up to those possibilities, to those higher vibrations in the world, that's when things start happening for you. But it all comes from being ready and being focused and being passionate about it. Because if you're not passionate about it and you don't care, nobody else is going to care either. And they're going to see it.
Yes, if you don't care, it shows. And if you care, it shows.
Absolutely.
And you know, I think that it was Michael Jordan. Somebody asked him what his regimen was, and he would shoot. And I think Steph Curry does the same thing, shoots like 1,000 shots a day. They still are continuing to just work aggressively, even though they're at the top of the totem pole, so to speak, in terms of their sport, their industry. But they still put the work in.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, if you stop working and you get to a place where you become complacent and you stop growing and you stop innovating and you stop coming up with new ideas. And it was Eugene Delacroix, who was a 19th century painter, French painter, but he was also really famous for his writings. And he said once that what inspires men of genius is not new ideas, but the idea that what's already been said has not been said enough. And so you have to go out there and say it enough. You have to go out there and do it over and over and over again, because it hasn't been said enough. Tell those stories, put that stuff out there into the world, because I think that's what connects us. Our stories are what connects us. Our art is what connects us.
Well, Joel, this has been a very interesting conversation, and I learned a lot about this cartoons and the whole industry and how it all weaves together. I would like you to show your book again and let people know the release date for Stamped. What's the
release date is June 6th. We're running a promo for Dr. Kendi, and I both have it in our Instagram bios. So
Okay.
if you pre-order the book, you can get a signed print of the cover that he and I both signed, which you can get if you go and do the pre-orders. And I think we're running that pre-order through the 2nd. I think it's when it goes through, or
Okay.
it might even be through the release date. So if you want to get that chance, just go to our bios and click on the pre-order sweepstakes, and you can get a copy of that. And there's a couple of other ones too. I think there's one on Goodreads too, where they're giving away some books. So for giving away some things for pre-order. So I would suggest, if you're interested in learning more about how the foundational understanding of American society is built on the backs of enslaved Africans, then this is a book for you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on Black Authors Matter TV. And I'm sure that Stamped will be a bestseller. And I'm excited to get my own copy as well. So I'm looking forward to reading it. And it'll be my first graphic novel that I read. I've seen a lot of them, but I haven't read one yet. I need to get on it.
You need to get on it.
Okay. All right. Thanks again for being a guest on the show, and
you're very welcome.
Success in your profession and field.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Same to you.
Bye.
Okay, so that was Joel Christian Gill. He's a cartoonist and graphic novels, and he has a new book coming out with Ibram X. Kendi called Stamped. It's coming out June 6th. So our next guest is Christian fiction author. She's also does inspirational romance, Rhonda McKnight, and she was on the show about a year ago, I want to say, maybe a little bit more than that, with one of her other titles, but she has a brand new book out called The Thing About Home. And so we welcome Rhonda back to Black Authors Matter TV with her new book. Oh, you have a copy. See, I didn't have to ask you. You know what to do. Okay, well, welcome.
I know what to do. I'm a pro.
Thanks to
you. Thanks to people like you that have broadcast your show for years, and I have watched for years. I've watched the other pros for years, and so you learn from watching Black Authors Matter.
Oh, well, I'm so excited. And we actually will be celebrating our 3rd anniversary on July 25th, 3 years. And we celebrated our 500th guest on May 9th.
Oh, okay. That was actually on my pub day, and I'll have to go back and look at that.
It was your pub day. Our 500th guest. Actually, our 500th guest was Sheryl Head. And you may know she has a new book out called Time's Undoing. It's historical fiction. And so, but it's random. You know, we never know how the numbering is going to land because we skip over the people that have been on the show before.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
it's the 500th different guest, not interview. So we're very excited about that milestone. And just, excited about, well, when we first started this, we didn't know where it was going to go. We didn't know how long it was going to last. We didn't know, but it's been so well received, and it allows us to really help with new releases. That's one aspect of it. When people have a new book out, the early weeks are the most important weeks, and those are the times that the word needs to really get out aggressively. And so we've been able to be a part of that. It's very exciting.
It is. So one of the great things that was birthed out of the pandemic.
Yeah, it started July 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. And it was because we couldn't get out, we couldn't have the festival, we couldn't do things. And so that's where it came from. So tell us about The Thing About Home, and what does it fall under in terms of genre? Is it historical? Is it women's fiction? Is it romance? Is it Christian fiction? Where I know it's, you hate to put things in a box, but just generally.
It's a combination. It's a combination.
Yeah, okay.
And a box isn't bad, because readers can be very selective about what they want to read. They want to know what they're getting. And if you can identify what it is, go ahead and let them know what it is.
Mhm.
Because nothing's more disappointing than getting a book that you didn't expect to get because it was mislabeled. And then I find it extremely exciting to get exactly what I wanted when I pick up a book. So, you know, but
You're
but
right.
anyway, the thing about home is
I
the
love your
story.
cover, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, the graphic design department did an amazing job with the cover. The feedback on the cover has just been amazing, and I was hoping that it would be so. When I received it, I initially thought, "Wow, that's like super sweet. Are people gonna want that?" You know, but wow, like the cover is the marketing people know what they're doing.
Yeah,
Not
it's
really
kind of
for.
whimsical.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's it makes you think of a stressless time, relaxing time, like a rural area, or like just a home that's away from all the hustle and bustle. That's what the picture
Yeah.
gives me. That's the vibes I get.
I think that's why a lot of people are thinking of it as a great summer read. But the thing about Home is the story of a social media influencer named Casey Black, who's who was left at the altar during her 7-year vow renewal, and how that that heartache causes her to react on social media in a very bad way. And as a result, she decides to go to the South Carolina Low Country to make a connection to family that she's never known. And so that's the heart of the story. That's kind of how it kicks off. It kicks off with a woman struggling with heartache and trying to make some sense of her life. So it is, in terms of the genre, it is women's fiction. I got to blend my three loves. It is women's fiction. It is written in dual timeline, so there is also a very breezy romance. So it has some strong romantic elements. And then because I go back with some of the chapters, probably about 25% of the book is set during Reconstruction and early Jim Crow years. It is also classified as historical fiction. So it is all three. This is my first women's fiction novel, so this is a new space for me. I've written probably about 20 romances over the last 10 years. About 10 years. I wrote my first romance in 2013. And so it's a new space for me. In terms of the content, it is published with Thomas Nelson, but it is classified as more of their mainstream, sort of clean and wholesome, as opposed to Christian. And that's also a change for me. It's my first novel that I've written that does not have a central point of view character who is Christian. So yeah. So
Okay, so Thomas Nelson is,
this book.
they're getting into, because Thomas Nelson, they've historically been a Christian-based publisher, because they
Correct.
did Bibles. They published Bibles and all kinds of Christian material.
On the
And
nonfiction
so,
side, yes. Mhm.
yeah. And so now, from what you're describing, they are expanding beyond this Christian fiction. And for people who may not like the strong religious underpinnings of a book, but they want something clean and wholesome, like you described.
Correct.
So, but that's good on their part. They're thinking, they're not betraying their initial mission.
Correct.
You know,
And
so
I think that, you know, some of that is, as you know, being a bookseller, the Christian bookstores, a lot of them have closed up.
yeah.
And so you had your large chains like, you know, Family Christian and Lifeway. And so to stay in business, sometimes you have to, and I'm not saying this is what they did, but I think that there is a truth in that some of the CBA publishers, Christian Booksellers Association publishers, have had to figure out a way to fit in ABA spaces. And so in order to do that, you know, you have to have a catalog of books that are a little more mainstream.
Yeah, the Mardell closed too. I don't know how big Mardell was. I don't know. I mean, I know they were in Texas. I think they were just in Texas and Oklahoma, but they had big
We have one
stores.
here in South Carolina, but I've
Oh,
never been to it. It's not in my, it's not near me. It's about an
is
hour
it
away. I
still
wonder if
open?
it's
Because the one
closed.
that was
I'll
near
have to
me
check.
closed.
I'll have to check and see.
And I thought they all closed, but I don't quote me. You know, COVID took a lot of businesses under. I mean, it's just when you don't have walking traffic because nobody can go outside, it's difficult to stay in business unless you have a quick pivot of some kind. And some people did, like restaurants pivoted to delivery of food. So you know, you have or just pick up, you know, instead of eat in. You have to survive, you have to pivot. And that's it, whatever industry you're in. And I say that as a serial entrepreneur that has since age 25. I haven't had a boss. And so but this particular space, we've been in the book industry for 23 years. No, more than that, 24 years. So we've seen a lot of evolution, new genres, you know, changes, but also expansion, because there used to be a much smaller number of authors, and with the industry change, it's really exploded, especially with print on demand and self-publishing becoming available. It really has exploded the numbers of people writing books, which is good. So the thing about home, one thing you talked about is when your main character is an influencer, and social media is, and it may have already been a theme in a lot of books. I read a lot of historical fiction, so I'm more in the past. You know, I'm reading more in the past, but some of the contemporary books, social media is really becoming a central part of stories because it's a central part of what we're doing now.
It is very much so. You know, I watched, I heard you with the last guest talking about how a lot of television is, you know, just like recycled things. I watched something real original last night on Netflix. It's called, departing away from my book, but it's called Missing. And it used social media and technology in a way that was very different. There have been other shows that have done this, but not at the level that I've seen, that at the level that this show did. And so, so I found that real interesting. It was pretty original, so you might want to check that one out. But you're
Well,
right.
you know, I have been seeing things on my news feed on Facebook about the show or the movie. It's a movie, right? Not a show.
It's a movie.
It's a movie. So it was on my list. I'm not like the first person to watch stuff. I like to try to hear different people's point of view, some of the people who I know probably like the same kinds of things I like, because somebody can tell me something is really good and then I go look at it and I'm like, this is garbage.
Terrible. Right. You know what? And it was kind of on my radar. And the reason I chose to watch it is because it was rated PG-13. I was so grateful. I was like,
Yeah,
oh God, me and my son,
right.
let's watch this movie.
Because you don't know what you're gonna get. You know, you'll be watching it and then all of a sudden they'll just haul off and put something in there that you're like, okay, why? Anyway, one thing I watched recently, and this is like off topic, but I watched Queen Charlotte. I really liked it.
I enjoyed it.
I liked it more. Now, I only watched the first season of Bridgerton, which I enjoyed. But I really like Queen Charlotte. I thought that was just very well done.
It was well done. I think that you would probably like the second season of Bridgerton. The first season I loved, but it was but just based on the novel that it was based on, it was, you know, it was real heavy on that sex, you know. And I'm not saying I'm grown, okay. I'm not afraid of sex, but it was just like, you know, sometimes when you're in a house and your kids, you're just like, oh, wait a minute, you know, because it was a lot. So and I didn't expect that. So, but the second season was because the book was not, that was not a central theme of the book. It was, I enjoyed it a lot. I really enjoyed the second season too. So, but Queen Charlotte was absolutely, I feel like, just a gift to the culture. I loved it.
It was. It was just really good. It was better than I expected, because like I said, people say stuff is good or this was great or whatever. They'll post, say, and I have to sift around and see who said it. That's what. Okay, and then I say, okay, does she like, this person likes the stuff that I like, so the chances that I will like what they're saying is good are better, because I've and you know, some of it's generational too, you know, it's just some stuff I just don't. I like a good drama that's well written.
Oh, so you ready to read The Thing About Home? I'm gonna need to drop a copy in the mail to you.
Okay,
So
well, I would love a copy, because as I talk about, I have my to be read shelf well, I don't even have a shelf. I have my books all over the house now because of this show. And all of them I mean to get to, and I wish I could take like 2 weeks, but I never can, where I can just sit and read, like be in a cabin somewhere, and all I have to do is read some books. I would love to do that. But I'm getting ready to go on a 10-day cruise, so maybe I can do it, some of it then. I'm going to Alaska.
Nice.
Yeah. So why did you say that about The Thing About Home when you said that you need to send me a copy?
Because it's you said you like a good, well-written
I
drama.
like a well-written drama. I like a well
Okay.
Or okay, here's my other thing I really like. I like, my favorite is like action, espionage. I like that kind of stuff, because it really tells me what the government and the private industry, where the technology is, how they're able to spy on us. And I know it's real. The stuff that they have in there is based on stuff that they're already doing. And I like the action aspect of it. So
Me too.
I like
My favorite.
things like I'll tell you a show that I liked on Netflix recently, a new show, was The Night Agent.
Yeah, it was great.
I like that.
Great.
That's the kind of, that's right in my wheelhouse kind of thing I like,
Me
or a
too.
really well-written drama. So you said The Thing About Home has some historical elements. So I've noticed this, and I don't know if this is new. I don't know if this is a new writing trend, or I've noticed a lot of books that go back and forth in time.
Okay, so I think dual timeline, not that it's new, but I think that publishers are acquiring more because there are a lot of readers that love them. When it's done well, people love it. And actually, I sold this book to Thomas Nelson as a contemporary novel. It did not have a dual timeline, a historical element. What it was is, as one of the things that you learn on the back cover of the book is that through the pages of her great-grandmother's journal, Casey discovers her roots run deeper than the low country soil. She learns that she has a people, a home, a legacy to uphold, and a great new love story if only she is brave enough to leave her old life behind. So there were, in the proposal that I had written for Thomas Nelson when I sold it, there were journal entries. And so as I began to write the story, I struggled with making those journal entries as interesting and active as I wanted them to be. They sort of had they felt very much like backstory. And I felt like as I wrote them, no matter how much I edited them in terms of from a developmental standpoint, they still felt like the author was intruding, or I was trying to deliver information. And I don't write like that. So I became very frustrated. And so I remember going to bed one night, because let me say one thing before I get to that. One little thing I want to put in here for anyone who's watching is I started off being traditional published. I published my first 4 projects with Carl Weber's imprint, Urban Christian, that was distributed under Kensington. So in 2013, I started independently publishing because the imprint that I was publishing with went out of business, okay, or they, ceased to exist. So I was kind of going to give up on writing. I thought, okay, well, there isn't really any space out here in publishing for Black Christian authors, because there wasn't, and so a friend of mine encouraged me to, and in particular for me, because I have always written a kind of, I hate to use this word, but it's the word that's coming to my mind, a little more edgy Christian fiction, a little more sexy, a little more, and I'm not going to say realistic, because I hate when people say my Christian fiction is realistic as opposed to somebody else's, but just a little more, a little less evangelical and completely clean. So even if I had tried to shop to a traditional Christian publisher, they would not have wanted my book. Okay, so I felt like I knew there were other authors who, when the imprint went away, they were going to begin to shop places like a Thomas Nelson or Bethany House or that. And I was just like, that's not the kind of book I write. I mean, my characters, I write stories about women in particular who are in crisis, who at some point their faith becomes a very central, their faith is central to their lifestyle and to their decision making. And so they do get to a point where they lean on that to kind of get themselves out of the trouble. Okay. So, and that's a lot of Christian fiction. But you have some Christian fiction that is extremely chaste. People don't kiss.
Not only that, they sit around quoting scriptures all day. I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody like that.
Neither.
And I'm a PK, and I've never met anybody like that.
and I love the Lord and consider myself to be a very devout spiritual person. However, I don't believe when a man sees a good-looking woman, the first thing he thinks of is a scripture. So we're gonna move on from that. Okay, I just don't know men who do that. So but there are people who are writing books like that. So I knew that I had no place in that space. So I had decided to stop writing. A friend encouraged me to self-publish. Best advice I ever received. I published my first indie romance, and then it was also my first romance book. So, and I have done very well with that. I have worked for myself since 2018, have fed myself and continue to gain weight and the whole thing off my books. So it works for me. So when I started, so this thing with Thomas Nelson coming back into traditional publishing was new for me, because I had been out. And so now I'm with this publisher. I have this book contracted. It's women's fiction. The book is giving me the blues. And I'm thinking, what have I done? Like, I could be writing like what I want on my own timetable, the whole thing. So I went to bed really frustrated with this, with all of it, with all of my decisions that I had made in my career, because I wasn't executing this story. And so I woke up at like 2 a.m. and I saw this woman sticking her hands in a river and washing her hands off. And I was like, and I heard her voice like talking to me like, I have something to say. So, and I had never experienced that before. Now my characters talk to me all the time. Actually, I did experience that one other time. Let me take that back. But I had not experienced that in a long time. Someone based like a voice in my spirit, like I have something to say. So I went to my laptop. It's 2 a.m. I start typing. I had the first chapter from 1867. And I thought, wow, I like this. And I read a lot of historical fiction. So I was like, I really like this. But I was nervous. So, because that's not what I had sold. That's not something that I had ever written. It was not something that I ever thought I would ever want to write. So I contacted my editor and I, asked for a meeting. And I told her, I said, I got these historical chapters happening. Like, this isn't what we agreed to. And she was just like, okay, like, do what you want. Do what you want. Well, we'll see what it looks like. So when she received the manuscript, she fell in love with it. She loved it. And so, and then my beta readers, because I have a few people who read it for me also, they were like, Rhonda, okay, you're doing a new thing. So it worked, in terms of, And so, and now, of course, the book's been out for, it's been 2 weeks today.
2 weeks
Yeah,
today.
yeah. And so, initially when the NetGalley reviews started coming in and the good reviews for the people that are reading the advanced review copy, I tell you, Gwen, I have thousands of reviews across Goodreads and thousands, because people review my books, have always reviewed my books very heavily. I have very, very loyal readers who take the time to review my books. So I have thousands of reviews.
That's great.
And yeah, it is. But I was so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, what are people going to think? So as the reviews would come in, it was like 5-star, 5-star, 4-star. I was like, okay, they're coming in. They like it. They like it. And so now I can officially say, I think they like it.
They like me. They really like me. Like what Sally Fields said that she won the Academy Award.
It's like I'm starting. I feel like it's a restart. Like I'm starting over. When you change genres, sometimes you can feel like you're starting over. And
That's
so because you're
true.
pulling in all these readers that had never maybe read you before. And so, yeah.
Well, that's great. So the thing about Home, now, is this a standalone book or is it
It
going
is
to
a
be a
standalone book.
Okay. And will you have another one? Did you do a 2-book thing with Thomas Nelson or?
I did. The second novel will be out, and tentatively at this point, it's June of 2024. The title is Bitter and Sweet. It's also a story set in the Low Country. This particular book, it will be set in Charleston, around Charleston Black restaurant culture. It begins in the year 1914 and runs through the historical story begins in the year 1914 and runs through the Great Depression. And then the contemporary story is, and the historical story, let me just go back, is about a woman who leaves home and has no choice but to figure out how to take care of herself and her children. And what she knows how to do is cook. And so she starts a restaurant in Charleston during Jim Crow, and how she builds that restaurant and how she maintains it. And the things that happen in her life as a result of that, because a lot of things were going on back then, Spanish flu, the boll weevil in South Carolina, there were a lot of economic issues. And so I kind of touch on a lot of that. And then the contemporary story is the story of her estranged great-granddaughters who had been summoned by their grandmother to come to save this family restaurant that's been, in the family for 85 years. But these two girls don't have a relationship. They don't talk to each other. So it's a lot more going on in that kitchen than cooking.
Okay. Now, are you from the Low Country?
I am not from the Low Country. I do have family that is from the Low Country. I'm originally from New Jersey, but all of my family is from South Carolina on both sides. And so
Okay.
I'm probably about maybe like an hour and 15 minutes north of like Charleston, and then Calhoun County, I'm even closer to, and that's a part of the Low Country. But I've spent a lot of time in the Low Country and in the PD area of, I live in the PD region of South Carolina. But everything along the coast a long time ago used to be the Low Country. And then South Carolina segmented the state up for economic reasons, how the states do. But still, at the end of the day, all of that land down there was land that enslaved Black people farmed for rice, because the land was low. And right. It was the topography. So it's all Low Country in my people's history. Okay. So I don't care how the state divides it up for tourism, but it's all Low Country because that's where our people were. For Georgetown, the book is actually set for the most part in Georgetown, and Georgetown was the region that was the #1 producer of rice during the time that our people were enslaved. So.
Okay, good, because I think it's Turning Pages bookstore.
Yes, she's my bookstore.
It's in South Carolina.
It is. I signed with her this past. I signed with her this past Friday and Saturday. She did an event for me with Charleston Library, and then I signed at her store.
Oh, okay.
She actually has autographed copies of my book, and I'm kind of trying to push people to buy from her, to support her, because she's the only Black-owned bookstore and a Black female in the state
In
of
the
South
state.
Carolina. We gotta
Mhm.
support her. So, and she's such a wonderful person on top of all that. You know, you add to the fact that you want to support a Black bookstore, you want to shop indie,
Yes.
but she's a wonderful person on top of that. You know, just
Yeah.
very good to authors.
I think she was on the show, I think for like the first year in 2020, somewhere in there. So
Okay.
when we first had the show, she was on then. So, and I got
I'll pop a buy link in the comments when we're done, so people can, if they want to buy the book, they can
get it from here. And we had one comment about Mardell. Somebody said it's still open in Waco, Texas. So they didn't go out of business completely. They're still open. I'm trying to see what else. Somebody else had a comment. So normally Rhonda does this, but she ran late at work. And so I thought she would be on, but she's not. So, and next week she'll be in Europe on a vacation. So I'll be by myself.
Well, folks are certainly getting out. She's gonna be Europe, you're gonna be in Alaska.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be here working on edit.
Mine is in August.
August.
Yeah,
Okay.
August,
Okay.
that's when I'm going. So, and she'll be doing the show by herself. So, oh, we're at the end of our time. I didn't realize it was 8:30. Okay, so normally we play off each other in terms of she'll normally tell me the time's up if I'm like occupied or talking too much. So, but anyway, Rhonda, your book sounds real incredible. And I plan to get a copy. And thank you so much for being on the show. And congratulations again on stretching yourself. The thing about home is stretching yourself. And Rhonda just logged in. So I'm going to admit her, the other Rhonda, Dr. Rhonda.
Okay.
Just logged in. So I'm going to at least let her say goodbye before we log off. So that Rhonda McKnight is on. She's just finishing up.
Hey, Rhonda.
Hey, Rhonda, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good.
Gwen and I have been talking like old friends. We talked about a whole lot of stuff before we even got to my book.
That sounds about right.
That's what happens when you don't catch up with people.
I understand.
But
I'm sorry I missed it. Unfortunately, I had to work late. It took me an hour to get home. Well, normally it would have taken less than an hour, but traffic got bad about 20 minutes into 20 minutes before my trip ended. And so I was stuck in 5-mile-an-hour traffic.
Oh, well.
Yes, it's terrible.
I don't miss that being in the rural South Carolina. I lived in Atlanta for 20 years, so now I'm in rural South Carolina, and I'm like, there are things I miss, but traffic
is not one of them. Yeah, Atlanta, that traffic is horrible. So anyway, we have 2 books we have to give away, and we have our guest on the last segment. So thank you so much, Rhonda.
Thank you for having me.
The thing about home.
Okay, y'all have a good night.
You too. Okay, we have 2 quick trivia questions before we bring on our final guest, and we have 3 guests actually.
While you're reading them, I ran in here so busy trying to get on the podcast. I left my other computer sitting on the bed. So go ahead and read it, and then I'm gonna grab my other.
So she'll post it. So we have 2 books we're giving away. We're giving away Zora books, her Happy Ever After. This is the first book. And here. The second book is Nigeria Jones. And it's by Ibi Zaboy. This one is by Taj McCoy. So, all right, here is the trivia question. And it is the first one. This is for Zora, books her Happily Ever After. And the question for that is, the main character, Zora, is a business owner of what type of business? So if you answer that correctly, you get your copy of this book. What kind of business does the main character Zora have? This in Nigeria Jones, the book is based on one of the author's most intriguing characters from an acclaimed anthology. What's the title of the anthology? You can get a copy of Nigeria Jones. This book, I think it came out 2 weeks ago. but these are both advanced reading copies. And so we are going to admit our final guest. And this, these three young ladies are part of a group of authors that is releasing a series, and I'm not sure exactly how they call it. It's called The Baes of Juneteenth, BAES.
Yeah, I thought that was a cute name.
I thought it was too. We had one of the authors on, Elle Wright. We had her on a month or so ago, and she told us about it. And I wanted to bring on three of the other authors. And this is a series where there's a total of how many? Well, let me let them tell it, because I had it written down. It's 11 total books. The release dates start June 7th, and they're releasing one every day, and they're novellas. So all of them have a tie-in with Juneteenth. And so each of these young ladies is going to tell you about their portion. Well, we're going to be asking them questions, but they're going to talk about their participation in this project, which I thought was really neat. And the reason I found out about it was this little display of these books kept coming across my news feed. That's how I found out about it. So your advertising is working because I've seen it several times. And that's so, you know, repetition is what gets results in advertising. So welcome Angela Seals, Sherelle Green, and Cheryl Lister to Black Authors Matter TV.
Hi. Thank you.
Hi. So one of you young ladies was involved in some of the other series that you all have had. I think it's Sherelle, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But
sorry.
Well, just tell us how this whole thing with the Baes of Juneteenth, how did it come about?
Well, it was actually all three of us have been involved with all the projects.
Okay.
So, yep. So it started off, and you know, I know you had Elle Wright on here. So it started in 2017. We were doing our Once Upon a series. So it was Once Upon a Bridesmaid. It was like the first books that we had actually done. And for that, me, Elle Wright, and Cheryl Lister had actually approached me and Angela Seals and was like, hey, we got this great idea. Do you guys want to be a part of our project? And we were all excited for it. We were like, yeah, what is it? And as soon as they started telling us about Once Upon a Bridesmaid, we were like, oh, we're all in. Like, let's write together, let's do it. And for that, I mean, I think we started having like maybe conference calls maybe every week, right, ladies? Like
probably was, yeah. Because we shut down the restaurant when we first talked about it. We met them in a restaurant because we had never met them face to face. And we literally closed down the restaurant.
I love when that happens. That means the conversation was good and it was flowing.
It was.
Right.
It was really good.
So you had that one, and then you had a holiday one, I believe.
Yeah, we did. So we've done together, the four of us collectively have done 3 Once Upon. So we did Once Upon a Bridesmaid, then Once Upon a Baby, and Once Upon a Funeral. But then we branched out and started doing our Baes anthology, which the Baes anthology consists of the 4 of us, but plus a lot of other authors. So it's anywhere from like 8, I believe, to the 11 authors that we have now for Baes of Juneteenth. And so we've done New Year Baes Solutions, and then we did Baes of Christmas, and now we're doing Baes of Juneteenth. So yeah.
Now, see, the first time I saw it, I was thinking, I'm like, they done made a reality show out of Juneteenth.
That's a good idea.
I know, right? Like, don't give her any more ideas. No. That's it.
I can see it now. Y'all fighting over who made the best potato salad. You know.
You know what? Oh my gosh. You see, I'm just like la 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 la. I can't hear you because the brain is already going, right?
So each of these is a standalone story, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And they all have Mr. Okay, what are the titles of your 3? Sherelle, you go first.
Mr. Straight Up No Chaser.
Okay. And Angela?
And mine is Mr. Second Best.
Okay. And Cheryl?
Mr. Right Now.
Okay. That's right now. And
Go ahead and take that however you want to.
okay.
Exactly what you think.
So did you all come up with your own titles?
We did. Us and all, so all 11 authors, we all like are in our own Facebook group together. So we knew that it was all going to be surrounding an organization that we were calling Mr. Black. And so we knew consistency was key. So everybody wanted to have Mr. in the title. And everybody really kind of took their title and made it their own around their bay that they were working with. So, you know, we really was just like, loving how creative some of the titles were. So yeah, everybody had fun with the titles. I know that.
So, and these are novellas. So they're what, under 25,000 words? Is that more or less?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Do all of the stories take place in your hometown, so to speak?
No. So I'm Chicago. So mine actually takes place in Scottsdale.
Okay. Scottsdale, Arizona?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Beautiful
I'm
area.
from Sacktown, but I'm originally from LA, so mine is in Los Angeles. my first hometown, but not my current one.
Okay. What about you, Sheryl? What's the setting for yours?
Mine is Chicago, and I'm from Chicago, so it does take place where I'm from. And then we all are repping in the whole series, all the authors are repping different cities. So that was something too.
Yeah.
That's fun. That's fun. Now,
so is there one person
you go first.
That's like the head queen in charge?
Sherelle and Leslie, we're gonna let them be in charge.
They're the brains.
They get us into trouble. Yeah,
organized. Someone call it organized.
Yes, they're the organizers.
Okay, organizers. Okay.
But they're not gonna act like they don't be on there telling us yay, nay, no, yes, we should do this.
We do.
Yeah, they're the brains, and Sheryl and I was more or less like, okay, let's wheel it back in. So we doing what?
Well, I actually have two questions. The first question, are any of these misters based on a date that you may have had that may not have gone well? I'll just put it that way.
No.
Oh man. I wish I knew what the other authors would say, but no.
No. But I have had some really bad dates, and I do plan to throw a couple in some book somewhere down the line.
Well, a bad date is better than a bad marriage.
This is true.
Yes, exactly. Because you can close that door on that day and say never again.
Y'all can just go your separate way.
Now, my second question was, do any of your characters make cameo appearances in anyone else's books?
That's something they can consider for the future, or
look, I'm just giving y'all all kinds of ideas.
Well, it's actually like a spoiler type thing.
Yeah, exactly. So we're like, we can talk about for the other books though, like our Once Upon a series that the three of us do with Elle Wright. All of the characters, it's always the same characters, but like we usually write about friends or brothers or some type of connection like that. So when you read one, you'll definitely see the other characters in that book. And so, you know, any type of pop-ups like that, we love to do.
Yeah, gotcha.
So, in writing the different stories, how long did you all have? Like, what was your deadline? Did you have 2 months, 3 months to write it? And did everybody get their work in on time? How is it working with 11 people? That's a lot of people to work
with.
Well, it's actually not, you know, we don't necessarily, well, everybody has their release date. So we're not collectively putting it up for them. Everyone is uploading their own story. So it makes it easy for us. They track their own sales, they track their own whatever. So whatever their deadline is given by the retailer, that's when their book has to be up. So,
yeah.
Oh, okay, I see. In order for it to come out on a particular date, it has to be uploaded.
Mhm.
by a particular date.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of gave everyone kind of free reign on like whenever they get their book done, they just know they have to have it done by whatever date they were given, you know. So I think some people just hit the ground running and writing. Some
Well,
maybe other won't.
It's a
Tony
break.
Benita says she read, let me see, she read all of the series. She said, where's her comment? Oh, she read all the series and she's waiting on this one. Tony Benita can read some books.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mama Tony is all over him.
Mhm.
So she is waiting for it. And she said all of them. She said that in another comment. Elle Wright is on, she's laughing and crying. Yeah, laughing and crying emoji. So
This sounds accurate.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does, yeah. Mhm.
And this book was won by Stephanie Burnham. I just wanted to let Rhonda know that.
Yes,
We give away books on the show.
she won the
That's
first
almost
one
every
too.
Oh, and Stephanie Burnham, and she's in San Diego, California. She watches the show. Her and Mary win the most books. Other people win too. Mary Evans lives in Waco. Between the two of them, they're ready. They're ready for the trivia. It doesn't matter if I do it at the beginning.
Stephanie posted the answer before I can even get the question in. She already knew what it was.
They're locked and loaded. See, that's what happened. Callie
They
says,
are
that's
ready
right. Win all of the
to
books.
win the book.
I want all the books. Just give me all the books.
Yeah. Now, when you all came up with the idea to focus on Juneteenth, for each of you, what aspect of Juneteenth did you pull into your story without giving spoilers, but just what did you think of individually when you were getting ready to do your writing of the story? Angela, you go first.
Oh, okay. Well, I think when I thought about writing Juneteenth, first off, I wanted to give, just a little bit of history around it because, a lot of people don't even know what Juneteenth is. And on top of that, when I was choosing where I would write it at, I was kind of trying to pick a state where things may have took longer to take place, so I can just flush that out a little bit more in my story, bring um, a little light to how not to give a lot away from my story, but it's pretty much showing the struggles of trying to get things done as far as bringing a different dynamic to a city that probably is not used to having so much diversity and inclusion. It's a big topic as of today. And for me, it was me just trying to, first I write romance, so that's gonna always be in the story, but also trying to bring a little history into it for people who may not know or may know and just want to see us being represented in a story such as Juneteenth and something stationed around history.
Okay, what about you, Sheryl?
I think so since my book takes place in Chicago, I really wanted to focus I guess not on the parts surrounding the holiday or Black history in general that you see all the time. So it's more surrounding I guess what goes on, maybe some behind closed doors that you don't always get to see. So I do think it ended up being a lot deeper than what I was originally aiming for, but I also feel like with the series that's surrounding Days of Juneteenth, we kind of couldn't get away from talking about, some of the tough topics or some of the things that, are more serious. So I love that was a pleasant surprise of how it turned out, but it did make me get a lot more involved emotionally in my novella than I thought it would.
That's interesting.
I second that. Yeah.
I
didn't
was gonna say
realize-
just ditto what they said.
Yeah.
Because,
No,
like
you
in
can't
LA
say
has
that.
some different, I think all of these cities have things that are surrounding Black history, not the normal things like, because LA is pretty popular for all the Watts riot, for all of those things. But then there's some other little known things before those times with the redlining, with the You know, even in some of the parks that are named for somebody, or the nice famous street that's named for somebody who was not necessarily a friend of the culture. And so it's just the things that, like you say, you find out these interesting things and you want to put them all in the book, but you know, you can't do that. So you have to be very selective of just sprinkling a little bit of the history into the books.
Without making it a history book.
Without
Yeah,
making it
right.
alongside the romance. Yes.
Yeah, I think for all of us, we didn't realize how heavy these stories would become.
Exactly. They're supposed to be lightweight, have a little,
Yeah, we
little
thought celebration
celebration
have
and
a
keep it
great
moving.
time.
Right.
Yeah, and we started writing it. We was like, oh wow, this
Wait a
is
minute.
heavy.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
Mhm.
interesting. Then sometimes when you write, a story will often go in directions that you didn't.
Right. It'll grow legs and just
Yeah.
move away from your focus
Yeah.
It
if you
does.
don't pay attention. You'll have a story in your head, and the one that you're reading is something totally different. And you're like,
Right.
where did that come from?
And
Mhm.
Characters
Yeah, and
will take you
sometimes
to
it's
places
good
that
that
you
it
don't
goes
plan
in
to go
another
ever.
direction. too.
Yes.
You know, it can be good. So, Rhonda, did you have another question before I ask? 'Cause I don't.
No, go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah, you go ahead. You already have
Okay.
a question in your mind.
Okay, is the book available in paper or is it only on the Kindle? All
no,
of you, all of them, all
They're
the whole
all
series.
they'll all be in paperback. The whole series will be in paperback. All the
Okay.
authors, we all agreed, ebook and paperback.
Right.
Okay,
Want
well,
everyone
that's
to get the
good.
version that they want in their hands.
Because I didn't know necessarily, well, are novellas normally done in paperback or are they normally mostly on
Mhm.
Kindle?
You
Oh
can
yeah,
put
no,
it
paperback
back.
too.
Mhm.
My
See, I
book
don't
Trust
read,
is a
I don't read
novella.
novellas
Seeing little
usually.
things, but
Yeah. My book Trust is a novella, and I have that in paperback as well as Kindle. I think there are so many busy people these days that a lot of people they'll go to the bookstore, if they do go to a bookstore, and they'll see a book this long and they're like, ooh, that's too long. So sometimes those shorter books are what's going to capture people's attention.
Right.
So I'm for it as long as it's a short story that feels complete.
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean, if it's a novella, but you feel like there's a lot of information missing, a lot of unanswered questions, that may not be a complete story.
Right.
So, do you find that a challenge when you're writing shorter stories to make sure that you've answered all of those unanswered questions?
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, especially for our bays with all three of them, like it's always the funny thing when you're talking to the authors that all of us are doing stuff and we're all saying, oh my God, I don't know if I can get in this word count because we all have so much to say. It's a lot of different drafts that we do, but I feel like what we all creatively do too is we may offer, like extended epilogues by signing up for our newsletters or things like that.
Yes.
May give you an extra catch up or follow up of the characters if we couldn't fit it, in that book. And we try to stick to what we can in novellas because we don't want you to get, a 50,000 word book from one person and then a 20,000 word book from another. And it's like, so we try to all stick as close as we can to the word.
Right. And we give some grace to, the fact to, 1,000 words over, that's not going to be, not a
Right,
mistake. But when
right.
you, like you say, when you get that extra 25 on top of 25, that's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, that's a novel.
Yeah, the readers are expecting why isn't everybody else's this way too. So,
No, don't be like me. I did an anthology last year, and there were a couple of people, they were supposed to stop at 10,000 words. They're sending me back 15,000 word stories. I had to call everybody and fuss at them. I'm gonna need you to edit this. I need you to whittle this
I
down.
can give you 11, but I'm not giving you 15, right? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
difficult.
so that means it's 11 books. So if I just was gonna start with one, I would have to pick. That'd be like an eeny, meeny, miny, mo type
Yes,
situation.
Pretty much.
More or
You're
less.
supposed to read one a
Read
day.
it,
That's
or
okay,
you
one a
know,
day.
they come
If
out one
you-
a day.
If you could look at my to be read stuff, Sheryl, books, I got so many books. I'm in two
but
book
my thing is,
clubs. I
if
got
we're
the
gonna
book club
do,
kickback on this show. I got all kinds. I got books that I just want to read just because they seem interesting.
you don't even want to look at me. You don't even want to look at my shelf. I'm with you, Gwen. I'm looking at my shelf right now, like, oh, I'm glad y'all can't see it.
You know what? I
Yeah.
think for us, we have the same kind of TBR pile because we're writing all the time. And I'm like, I have
Yes.
so many of even their books. It's like, because they're like my favorite. And I'm like sitting here like, I cannot read a book because I have 1,575 deadlines.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
just
So
want to
good.
read.
I'm also writing a book that I'm trying to finish. I hope to finish it by my birthday. And I'm getting close. I'm getting close. I'm at 40,000 words. So I'm getting close, Rhonda, to finishing. I'm excited. Then I gotta get it edited. But I'm
That's
excited
cool.
about this. Is gonna be a good
Oh, yeah.
story.
Good for
Congratulations.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a
Congrats.
sequel to my first book, but they're 10 years apart.
Oh, wow.
So I'm gonna redo the cover of the original one just so they can be tied together visually. And the story does pick up where the other one left off, but I shave off 5 years. So it's actually been 10, but in book 2, it's only been 5. But you know,
Right.
writing, you can say whatever
You can do, yeah, you can change your
Be a
timeline the way
creator.
you
Do
need
what
to.
you want.
Yeah, you can do that. So if you are you doing the base, do you have another base one already in the can, or how do you determine that?
I don't know,
So
the idea of trying to pop into the head. We got a set schedule, per se.
We have so many ideas. I mean, because it's more like we have more ideas for future bays and what's and ponds than what we have time to actually write.
Mhm.
But that's a good problem. That's a good
It is a
problem.
good problem. It is a good
Yeah,
problem.
because we all have our individual things that we want to get out. So it's, we try to find time to come together. That's the part that kind of
Fitting everybody's schedule. Okay, when do you
Yeah.
have, can we do it at this date? This date is like, oh, no, yes, no, yes, no.
And then we
Okay.
collaborating, but we love collaborating with other authors too. So then it's like our schedules plus other authors' schedules, just a lot of scheduling.
Mhm.
to find
Now,
time.
do you find that writing with that many people, does it help book sales? Like when people have 11 options, as opposed to your standalone work, do you find that you sell more of the ones in the series? I'm just curious about that.
well, yeah, because each writer has their own readership, and it open you up to someone who may not have never read you before. So
Okay.
it's kind of like cross promoting.
Okay.
Because I might have readers who may never read Sheryl, which I find it hard to believe when we write it together all the time. But but just using her as an example, they will probably buy that book. What we found is, they buy the whole series, and then, I actually will have readers to reach out and say, "Hey, I've never read you before, but this won't be my last," because they read
I love that.
the anthology that I was a part of.
Mhm.
So yeah,
I love that.
But then we also know that there are going to be that handful of readers who will only purchase their faves and not the rest. I mean, so you already, that you go in knowing that you're probably going to get that, because there are some readers who, these are my 5 favorite and these are the only 5 that I'm reading, I'm not doing the rest. But most people tend to give the whole series, a read, so which is wonderful.
Plus, I think the added part of it too is being able to work behind the scenes with authors that we admire and enjoy working with too. Like, I mean, it gives you just a chance to even, talk about different marketing ideas, talk about, different just things in general. Otherwise, it's like we would only see each other at events or, the occasional time when you just randomly messaging on social media. So that part of it to me is like an added value too, because then you're getting to connect with other people,
Well, I love the collaboration, and I love the creativity, and I love the creative collaboration. The whole, I mean, I like I really,
yes to all of this. I mean,
yeah, I
just
think
the
it's
sisterhood,
wonderful.
the working together,
Yeah.
having complementary stories. I love the entire concept, and congratulations on making this work.
Thank you.
Yeah, and without any kind of public cat fights or anything like that, you know. Because, you know, that's like a stereotype, you know, that women can't get along or whatever. And so I just think it's wonderful that you all have done this collaboration. And, oh, the date of the first one is June 7th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then every day there's one coming out,
Yes.
except Father's Day. That's what Elle said. She said it was coming out every day but Father's Day because you didn't want to step on Father's Day.
We
Right.
did. It's a
Right.
special day and we're writing about bays, so we got to give them
Right.
that.
Yes.
Okay, so Bays of Juneteenth, BAES. Get your copy of each one and support these ladies that are doing just an amazing project.
Yes.
You. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for having us.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
And good luck on your book and hurry up and finish it.
Oh, yes. yes.
Thanks for the encouragement. All right, well, that's the end of our show for this week. And what we want to do is let you all know, if you want to get your book in the Black Authors Matter Children's Book Awards, then the deadline, it has to be postmarked by June 5th. So don't procrastinate. A lot of people are waiting till the end, and they've been pouring in. You know, we had it out there for months, but this last 2 weeks, it's like everybody woke up and said, okay, I got to get it in. So we've got some really amazing books, so we're looking forward to getting more. And so next week, Rhonda will be in Europe, but she's going to do a little video for us so we can see her in Europe, and then she'll be back after that. So I'm saying good night, and Black Authors Matter TV will be here next week. I'm Gwen Richardson signing off.
And I'm Dr. Rhonda Lawson. Have a wonderful evening, a great week, and I will see you in 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Thank you for tuning in, and join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern for another edition of Black Authors Matter TV.